As anglers, we would catch so many more fish if we just change this one thing, and it's not that hard. Most of the time when we approach isolated cover, and by isolated, I'm talking about that single lay down, that maybe first dock into a bay, or an isolated weed patch, or maybe a key structure area like a funnel. So many times when we approach these, we make a cast or two, often to the sweet spot, maybe catch one, maybe we don't, and then move on. Well, one thing that I have really learned in the last couple years observing bass so often is that if it's a decent piece of isolated structure, now I'm talking, maybe 2 to 3 times the size of a boat, let's say. I'm not talking about these massive weed beds or 50 laydowns in the row, but a decent piece of isolated structure. They hold multiple fish. Bass are together so much more often than we give them credit for. And if that isolated cover moves away from the bank in a perpendicular manner where it's got a shallow end and a deep end, those fish, those bass can be positioned all over it. So what we need to do, and I've changed to this as well because I used to do just the opposite, is we need to start off of that cover to where or target the area that we think is the first structure change off of that cover. And it doesn't have to be huge. Maybe it's where the lake bed or the river bed dips down a foot, or we need to maybe in our mind's eye assume there's a rock out there or another stump or another branch or just a bottom end of a weed line. We need to be thinking about what could be there that can be holding fish before we get up into that cover. About a month ago, I did a pre-spawn bass video, and this was a perfect example. There was this lone stick right here that you could see both from the boat deck and from the shoreline. So often as anglers, we'd pitch a jig in there a couple times, maybe catch one, maybe not, and move on. Well, there were 4 nice bass here, all positioned off of it. So if we were a boat that came into this pocket or walking down the shoreline, odds are we were going to miss them because they were not right on it. They were on that first structure change just off of it, and they move up and down. Bass do that all the time between bright light, low light periods. They move up and they move down on those isolated pieces of cover, and we need to be thinking about they can be anywhere in that stretch. Well, think about how much that would have changed your day. Let's say if we were fishing this lone stick here, in the pre-spawn, and between pitching to this stick and catching 0, or starting off of it a little bit and methodically working our way up and now maybe catching 2 or 3 of those fish. The worst thing that we can have happen is to throw up into a sweet spot on a bigger piece of isolated cover and catch one right away, and then all the other fish that are there, we put them on high alert, or even worse, they slip away from that cover and down into deeper water. But if we approach it just the opposite, we can catch many more fish. There's few guarantees in the bass fishing world, but I can say with almost certainty that if you do it this way and approach it this way, you are not only going to catch another fish here or there, you're going to drastically improve your catch rate. And sometimes people ask me, well, what do you mean about methodical? How many casts are you making on this isolated piece of cover? Well, if it's decent size, like I said, maybe 2 to 3 times the size of a boat, think of a weed bed or a big old, maybe an evergreen tree that had fallen into the water, maybe that's going to be 20 casts from that very outside part of it, work up the sides and all the way up towards the shoreline. If it's a little bit smaller, maybe a single dock, maybe that's going to be 5 to 10 casts working on the deeper edge of it and then all the way back into the shallow part. You know me, I love to skip lures and jigs up underneath of stuff. Well, before I pick up that skipping rod, I need to make sure that I hit that deeper water just off of that isolated cover. It's not easy to do. We want to just boom, get into that good looking spot right away, but we're leaving so many fish that we're not even giving ourselves a chance to catch. And hey, if you want to watch a video on a lure that is perfect for this type of presentation or approach, because you can get deep water, shallow water, and everything in between, go ahead and check out this video right here on this stupid tube, and make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.